First, the spotlight to Bu Stella Christie, Vice Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology. Bu Stella, allow me to deep dive on what you guys are doing in the Ministry of Education, Bu. As someone who's been both as a disruptor and policymaker for the past few months, of course, you understand better than most the gap between what education teaches and what industry actually need, especially in fast-moving sectors like tech and creative economy. To me, I always see that there's always a huge gap between academic output and industry relevance. How does our education system being restructured to produce graduates who don't just seek jobs, but create them especially in the creative and digital sectors?
Thank you for the question. Excellencies, ministers, vice ministers, ladies and gentlemen who are present here, thank you for inviting me to this symposium on sustainable infrastructure. A great honor to be here. To answer the question about the gap between industry need and education produced graduates, first of all, I think we have to understand that by nature, this will always happen because the move of the industry is much faster than the move of the curriculum and the people who are teaching the curriculum and people who are doing the curriculum. So if you let business as usual, the gap will always be there. So that is the first nature that has to be understood. So what is it that one has to do, or what the government has to do, what the practitioners have to do, what people and the public have to do in order to actually decreases this gap? There are two routes, and these are the two most important routes. The first route is the one that I think is very logical to all of you, which is that the industry must participate in the curriculum making. The industry must participate in the curriculum building. The industry must be the teachers themselves, the professors themselves. The industry must be also the one who are providing the infrastructures that are used directly by the people there. This is what I usually call industry match education or industry match higher education. So this is the first route, industry match higher education. At the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology, in which I'm the Vice Minister, we do this very explicitly. So we have a program that is called Vocational Industry Program. What we do is we match the industry with vocational schools. However, if we just think about the match, this will be something that business as usual as well. So what we are currently particularly focusing on is that we look at the best practices abroad. So for example, I've just come back from a series of visits and talks and discussions, particularly with China and ASEAN countries, where we know that Chinese companies are investing a lot in Indonesia, and so are other international companies in Indonesia, but Chinese companies is one example where there's... And the route of the human capital in the Chinese industry, my minister just said manufacturing is very important, so let's take that as an example. That is true, manufacturing is very important. The route of how the industries or the manufacturing industry in China, where they got human capital, is usually direct from the vocational higher educations, from polytechnics. So usually a single polytechnic, let's say, I'm just going to give an example, perhaps polytechnics called Liuzhou Polytechnic University, they will actually supply their graduates to particular industries. So taking this model, what we want to do is to take this pair. So it's not just the university, it's not just the industry, but the pair of the university and the industry to actually partner with the university in Indonesia. So this is what we call the U to U to B, university to business, where we also ensure that the students at our Indonesian university will have the opportunity to be at the universities abroad, that will directly place them or put them into contact with the industry that is already partnered up with that university. And a lot of them of this industry are also already investing in Indonesia. So our graduates can actually go to those industries because they're invested. So this is one route. There are a number of these things, but again, the key here is industry match education, industry match higher education. This is what I say, what I already said, is very logical to all of you. It needs a really explicit effort from the ministry, but also from the universities, and also to gather other ministries, because the investment, we want to enforce international investment in Indonesia to always have to give training into universities in Indonesia so that it's become industry match. That's the first route. The second route is what I would say a little less obvious to all of you. But this is very key and very important. And this is that university has to produce new innovations and new technologies. Because if you do not want to be behind in the industry need, you need to lead it. So you need to actually come up with new technologies that will actually create the industries. This has happened in any parts of the world that are successful economically. But the realization that this is so key, that you have to have research that will have an outcome in new innovation, in new technology that actually drives new industry, this is not always explicitly stated and always explicitly taught on in the Indonesian public. And today I want to really encourage all of you to really seriously think about that. Because many of us think that, well, research just comes out in papers. That is not true, ladies and gentlemen. When it's quality papers, that is a communication that new technology is there. Have you ever wondered why the Silicon Valley is where it is? Why Google is where it is, right? It is precisely because of Stanford University. Just now, my minister put up a very important table where one of the third largest cluster of economy from science and technology is in Beijing because of Tsinghua University, or in Shenzhen because of Sun Yat-sen University in Hong Kong. And so university drives this, and the way they drive this is by having research that will have an outcome in new innovation. So we must invest on the research. That is the second route. That's a very important route. You have to invest on the research. You have to invest on educating the graduates, educating the university students to have a research mindset. Research mindset doesn't mean that you have to be a researcher. Research mindset means that you can develop a new technology that will make you a new entrepreneur, so that you will always lead the technology. And only that, you can decrease the gap. So again, two routes. Industry match, so that's for the current industry, and new innovation to lead the industry.
All right. Wow. Thank you, Bu Wamen. Allow me, because backstage we had this agreement to ask each one of you one question by one. But then again, I want to respond to your answer. Let me respond to your quote-unquote solution. You have two routes, right? The first route is the industry match kind of education. We've been talking about that framework for quite some time, Bu. But what are the challenges in creating such? How do we restructure our education system, university or school, not just to become a lecture hall, but more into like innovation labs? Is there any challenge that we need to tackle on that particular thing?
I think in any system, the challenge is whether there is an obvious need to actually do what needs to be done. So if we talk about the industry match curriculum, it can only be there if the industry feels the need to actually have graduates that will match the industry need at that point. And I think from the industry side, this is actually very easy to be seen. Because why? Well, because let's say companies from China to invest in Indonesia. If they use human capitals, workers who are imported from China, that's going to be a lot higher in cost compared to employing Indonesians. And so the economic need for the industry is very clear, and the industry will want to do this. And we have seen this in our program. So now the challenge is to make it obvious for the universities, the polytechnics, the vocational schools, to actually, why do you actually would want the industry to do that? And in theory, this should be obvious because you would want your graduates to be employed so that you will be recognized as a university that is very high employability. But usually this need from the university is not always made obvious because university can do business as usual and still exist as a university. Industry, companies cannot. So this is something that you have to balance, and you have to make it obvious to the, perhaps more into the, that's the job of the ministry, to actually really talk, understand the needs, and also make the need obvious for the university to do that. For the second route, the innovation, that you have to lead innovation that will actually lead industry, innovation lead industry. This challenge is huge. And I would summarize that this challenge is huge because people or the public have not seen the return of investment clearly. That is, for every dollar, for every rupiah that you invest into the research, it's very difficult for the public, industry and non-industry alike, government as well, to see how much exactly is the return of investment for every dollar that you put. So it is again the job of, because why? Because investment in research sometimes can be very long term. So that's very difficult to see. So we tried very much from the Ministry of Higher Education and Technology to always give numbers. And I can give you numbers right now. There's a new study that, for example, that shows that University of Kansas, not the most top university, but University of Kansas, there's a new study that shows it creates $7.98 billion for the Kansas region in terms of the economy. Stanford University, the study actually shows that Stanford University annual revenues that are generated by alumni and graduates of, and students and professors of Stanford University is $300 trillion. $300 trillion, making Stanford University alone is one of the biggest, one of the 10 biggest economy in the world, just from what they generate, one university. So we don't have yet that number. In fact, today I just talked to my minister that we need to do this study to show that in Indonesia we have that too. So we need to show in terms of numbers that investment in research will have a direct investment in the economy so that we all can do that route as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Bu Stella. Very well elaborated, Bu Stella. So let's move on to, I want to see from another optics, from the infrastructure kind of optics. So to that, let me introduce you to Bu Maulidia Indah Junika. She's the Director General for Strategic Infrastructure, Minister of Public Works.